Welcome to The Snap with Alexis Perry and Sydney Jones.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for this week's edition of The Snap. I'm Sydney Jones, your host, joined by my co-host, Alexis Perry. As always, Alexis, we are 1-0. It feels so good to start the season off on the right foot and get that win in September. Hopefully the first of many here, but that was our first season opening win since 2018. And I got to say, after Sunday's game, I kind of feel really optimistic about the potential of this team and our next couple opponents.
Yeah, I totally agree, Sydney. It is just one game, but it's definitely a big step in the right direction as this team really hopes to just fight their way into the playoffs this year for the first time since Super Bowl 50. And it really does feel like this team has the talent to make a playoff run. Now, of course, the absences of guys like Jerry Jeudy and Ronald Darby, even Graham Glasgow, that will really hurt this team over the next few weeks. But thankfully, there is a ton of depth at those positions, and there are guys that are chomping at the bit to take advantage of a few more snaps. I think KJ Hamler, he's one that I think will have a really big bounce back week this week in Jacksonville, and he's going to benefit a ton from being out on the field more. And it's going to be really fun seeing Caden Stearns and Nate Hairston possibly in those dime packages like Coach Fangio was talking about this week, with Pat Surtain playing strictly on the outside. So all in all, I think this team is in such a good position going into week 2 up against the Jags that, that's a team that's going to be really eager to get their first win of the season. So it will be a challenge. Hopefully they're not overlooking this team and looking ahead to week 3 back home here against the Jets.
Right. Well, Alexis, like you mentioned, the Broncos will look to ride off this momentum as they travel to Jacksonville today to take on the Jaguars at TIAA Bank Field this Sunday. So here joining us on the Snap this week to help get us up to speed on the Jaguars and this week's matchup is Jacksonville Jaguars team reporter Ashlyn Sullivan. Ashlyn, it is so good to see you again. How have you been?
I've been good. I'm so excited to see both of you. It's been a while. COVID has separated us, that's for sure. But Sydney and I went to Florida together. So this is awesome. Now we're both working for NFL teams and back together. Pretty cool.
I know. A couple Gators on the pod today. I love it.
Sorry, Alexis.
It's okay. Go Buffs, though.
Well, week 1 is in the books, guys. Ashlyn, obviously not the outcome Jaguars fans were hoping for, but how was the trip to Houston?
The trip to Houston, it was awesome and not so awesome for obvious reasons. Awesome because we weren't on the road for so long. That was my first road trip back post-COVID, and I'm sure for you guys too, it was just nice to see fans in the stands and it be a real NFL atmosphere. It was disappointing because the Jaguars wanted to come out swinging and there were high expectations, maybe a little unfair high expectations, and that's what happens when you have Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence on your team. But I thought they'd be a little more competitive than they were. And I think it was a kind of an eye-opener for everyone that there are a lot of things the Jaguars need to work on.
Well, Ashlyn, before we delve too deep into this upcoming Sunday's game, can you start by telling us what your role is with the Jags?
Yes, so I am the team reporter and producer for the Jaguars, going on my 5th season. Started right out of Florida as a seasonal broadcasting assistant, wrapping camera cords and hoping something would work out. And I never would have guessed I'd be here 5 years later. So
it's amazing. It's amazing what over and under can do for your career. Just coiling cable can really launch you. We'll get into that here in just a little bit, though.
Yeah. Ashlyn, I honestly can't believe you've already been there 5 years. I feel like those 5 years have flown by.
It really has. And I started the 2017 season when the Jaguars made it to the AFC Championship game. So I started on this high and I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. And as we all know, the Jaguars have been very up and down since then. So it's been a wild ride. It's been very unexpected.
Well, like Alexis mentioned, we'll dive a little bit more into your career later on, but let's get into this week's game, Ashlyn. First and foremost, from the Jags perspective, what excites you most about this matchup?
One, it being the home opener. I mean, this city is buzzing. You guys will see when you get here, Trevor Lawrence, he is a young god walking around this city. Ever since, honestly, January, when the Jaguars clinched the number 1 overall spot, everyone has been so excited about Trevor Lawrence. So for this to be the one real opportunity, the first one, for them to see him in person is going to be very, very cool.
I feel like there were kind of mixed reviews from Trevor Lawrence's performance this past weekend, like you kind of mentioned earlier, threw for, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, but also had those 3 interceptions, made some really great plays, made some not so great plays. Ashlyn, what are your expectations for Trevor this weekend? What do you want to see him kind of improve upon?
I'm not that worried about Trevor Lawrence. And frankly, I don't know if a lot of people are. I think he's a rookie, and we saw the 3 turnovers, and I thought those would happen, especially when they were coming from behind and he threw 51 times week 1. And that Coach Meyer said that can't happen anymore. I would like to see him come out against the Broncos a little more calm, which is, that's a lot to ask of a guy that's starting his first home game in Jacksonville. But I think whoever watched the game would admit that he looked a little frazzled at first, but settled down. So settling down a little earlier, I think, would really benefit and get that offense clicking quicker.
Well, Lawrence and the Jags offensive line, they'll be facing Von Miller and company on Sunday. It seems like Von really has a new drive and a new passion this year. He recorded 2 sacks against the Giants last weekend. So how do you hope Jacksonville's offensive line really steps up to the challenge of facing Von and especially this Broncos front 7?
Yeah, that is a huge test. And the biggest thing here in Jackson when we talk offensive line is it's really the only group that survived the old regime. It's offensive line coach George Warhop is one of the few that stayed when Coach Meyer took the job, and all 5 starters are the same. So we can't say that for any other group on the team. So this is a huge test for them. And Coach Meyer mentioned Von Miller. You have to know where he is at all times on the field. Trevor Lawrence mentioned it. He was saying how the Broncos defensively, they really favor those one-on-one matchups. So truthfully, I will say maybe ignorantly, I was looking at this game in preseason in August and saying, you know what, week 2 Broncos, all right, that's okay for the Jaguars. That's a good test. And now I look at this defensive front for the Broncos and I think this is trouble. This is challenging.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Broncos cornerback Ronald Darby, he was placed on IR this week due to a hamstring sprain. Now it's the rookie Pat Surtain. He'll be stepping up to take his place on the outside. So what can this Broncos secondary expect from guys like my favorite former Buff, Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, DJ Chark? Tell us about those guys.
Yeah, it's an awesome group one. They're awesome guys, and I think they're all incredibly excited for Trevor Lawrence because they have been through some roller coasters at quarterback here. So truthfully, we don't really know the ceiling for this wide receiver group. They had 3 quarterbacks last year, and truthfully, they didn't know who was starting what week. So I'm curious to see what a consistent quarterback will bring for this wide receiver group. Really, all eyes are on DJ Chark. He's going into his last year of his contract. He's playing for that second contract. He's playing to prove he's that number 1 wide receiver. And we make the argument here in Jacksonville all the time. We really don't have that. You don't have that number 1 guy. You have a group that can do a lot, but I think it's DJ Chark's role for the taking that he can prove maybe this week, I'm that guy.
Yeah, what's the mindset really been like in Jacksonville this week, Ashlyn? I know, it's always tough after a loss, but I did see that Shaquille Griffin, talked to the media and said that, the spirit is still there and that the guys have, really been attacking practice.
Yeah, they said on the plane ride home after Houston, everyone kind of, cooled off a little. And when they watched the film, they said, we know what we need to do. We know what we need to fix. Shaquille Griffin, for example, it was the first defensive drive. He had the interception in his hands, second play of the game. He didn't make the catch. And he's like, hey, that's a really easy fix. I got to make the catch going forward. So there's no panic button. I think the Jaguars knew they had a lot of work to do. The outside expectations are you have Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. So of course you got to make the playoffs this year. I don't want to say that internally the Jaguars' expectations, but the expectation is this is a good team that didn't play like a good team week 1.
You talk about the expectations of, having Trevor Lawrence there, having Urban Meyer there now. Obviously, Urban took the head coaching job this past offseason. What's it been like with him as the head coach this year?
It's still kind of surreal. I won't lie to you. He walks into press conferences and it's like, oh, he's here and he's doing this. I've been really pleasantly, I don't know if surprise is the right word, but for example, post-game, Houston Jaguars did not play well. They lose their first game and Coach Meyer is not used to losing. And I'm thinking in my head, how is he going to handle this? He's never lost a season opener in his career. How's this going to go? He walks in and handles it great, calmly, knew what he needed to do, knew what the team needed to do. I was very impressed with how he handled it. So I think he's ready for this challenge, and I've been impressed also. I'll admit I thought he was kind of a my way or the highway type of guy. I think that's the stigma of him nationally. And it's been cool to see him rely big time on all the coaches around him that have NFL experience. Darrell Bevel, for example, Brian Schottenheimer, both came from the Seattle Seahawks. And he's always saying, I'm picking their brain because I don't know some things. I have to learn these things. So it's been cool to truly get to know him and see how different the stigma is than what he actually is.
And for us, Ashlyn, growing up Gator fans, I'm sure it was really crazy for you to find out that he was being hired, because I would have been freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, when it was in the conversations, I thought, okay, like maybe this will happen, but I never really thought that he was going to be the guy, just because of all the news and all the headlines. I don't know, for some reason I didn't think that it would be him, and then when it was him, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Well, Coach Meyer, he was not made available to the Denver media this week. So Ashlyn, tell us, what has Coach Meyer's approach been to this game on Sunday against the Broncos?
He talks big time, one about Teddy Bridgewater. And I think truthfully, week one, when we're talking about Houston and Tyrod Taylor, and I think he was a little bit underestimated. And I don't think they're going to make the same mistake going into this week two with Teddy Bridgewater. So he's talking about that and having to keep him in the pocket. And like we said, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, Justin Simmons, all of those guys, those one-on-one matchups, you have to win them. And on paper, it does not favor the Jaguars when you see those one-on-one matchups. But Coach Meyer is saying, take the name out of it, take the stigma out of it. Von Miller, got to win that matchup.
Right. Okay, last one on the matchup for you, Ashlyn. Who's a guy in Jacksonville that maybe we're not talking a lot about that you think could be a potential threat here for the Broncos on Sunday?
Oof, good one. I think it's your guy. I think it's Laviska Shenault.
Okay.
And I will say more people are talking about him. For example, I'm talking about people that draft him on fantasy and are like, he's the guy. But like we said, when we see Marvin Jones and DJ Chark, that's your 1-2 punch. That's your one receiver. That's your two receiver. Laviska Shenault, I think, has a great opportunity here to overtake the role. Not overtake, because it's very difficult. Travis Etienne is out for the season, and they drafted him to be that Swiss Army knife, that explosive offensive threat. Laviska can get there in a different way, and this is his opportunity. He's the guy. So I'm really curious how they use Laviska in this offense, because his skill set's so unique, and this would be a really cool matchup for him week two in front of a home crowd to say, hey, I'm the guy. Don't worry. Yes, Travis Etienne's out for the season, but I can handle this.
Well, Ashlyn, thank you so much for your insight and your Jags perspective of this matchup. But let's switch gears a little bit now. As our listeners know, here on The Snap, one of our main goals is to highlight some amazing women in and around the NFL, and you certainly are one of them, Ashlyn. So, you mentioned you've been with the Jags now for 5 years. What's been your favorite part of this job?
My favorite part, I will say it's the player relationships. It's learning about these guys. It's becoming friends with their families and their wives. And for example, DJ Chark is a great example. DJ Chark came in the year after that I started and was drafted in 2018. And I've seen him get engaged. I've seen him get married. I've seen him have his first child. And it's so cool to see these guys grow into what they are now. And that's the great thing I think about being internal and being within the team. Like you guys know, is they're your coworkers, they're your teammates. And yes, we cover them, but we eat lunch with them and we see them walking in the building and we say hi when we're walking down the hallway. It's a very unique job. And I think that's the most rewarding, is getting to know these guys on a different level.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, last year was my first year and it was during COVID. So I was in a completely different building. So this year it's been really fun just getting to know all the guys, like you said, like on a personal level.
Mm-hmm. Love that. COVID ruined that a little bit for us, but we're back.
Yes, it did.
Take us back a little bit to even maybe when you were at Florida. What were some of the things that you did early in order to kind of get a head start in this industry?
Yeah, like Sid did as well. Florida football obviously is huge. And I knew I wanted to work in football. And yes, I was sports broadcasting, but I was kind of opening myself up to, okay, maybe sports management, maybe PR. I knew my passion was football and I wanted to do something related to that. So I started covering Florida football like Sydney, I think my sophomore year. And it was a little difficult. I mean, it wasn't your typical college experience. It was waking up at 5 a.m. on game day morning and heading to the stadium while all your friends went and had fun and you were sacrificing your college years working for free. But it got me here. And I'm so grateful for it, because now this resume of a 21, 22-year-old female says, oh, she covered SEC football for 3 years. I think that's what got me the job.
Ashlyn, you mentioned that you worked all those Florida Gator football games. Is there any piece of you that wishes that you can maybe go back and live more of that college lifestyle, or are you really glad with the path and approach that you took to this industry?
Truthfully, because now I do sometimes have the opportunity to go back to Florida, because Gainesville is only an hour and a half away from Jacksonville, and I sit in the stands and I'm like, this seat stinks. I could be
Yeah.
healed.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd be working, but you get so used to doing that it's almost like you feel left out when you are a fan. You're never happy. You can never win.
That's so true. I honestly don't think I'd go back and change a thing that we did at Florida.
We had an awesome experience. And Sid and I were great teammates. And funny enough, Charlie Jordan, who went to Florida and worked with us at Florida football, is now the Jaguars' new social media manager.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did not know he got the job with the Jags. That's awesome.
Yeah. So college kids watching, do these things and look what you can become.
You mentioned, there being some difficult times within college, but have there really been any challenges that you faced getting to where you are today?
I will say, I think winning's great and winning is so fun. And the content that comes with that is awesome. You learn a lot about yourself when you cover a losing streak, when you have to go into the locker room and the team has lost 8 games in a row and you have to stick a mic in someone's face that just lost again. I think that's truly what has gotten me to build these relationships with these players. And I hope that they can trust me, that I have their back, but I have to ask the questions I have to ask. That'll make you grow in your career when you have to go in that locker room with a losing streak.
Well, Ashlyn, last but not least, like Sydney mentioned, here on The Snap, we really want to inspire the next generation of young women who want to come up and eventually take these roles that we're filling right now. So what's maybe the best piece of advice that you could give someone looking to break into the industry?
I would say be fearless. I think a lot of times I am still the only female in the room. And there's times I look around, I'm like, I'm the only girl in here. But it just really doesn't affect me. Don't change who you are. I think, for example, when Coach Meyer took the job and it was the first press conference and I was the only female in that room, and I thought, you never know how coaches respond to this. And he's treated me very equally to all my male counterparts. So don't think differently. Go in fearless. If anything, I think have more courage, be more courageous than your male counterparts, because this is at such an advantage that we're the only females at times in this room. There's nothing wrong with that. And I hope in 5 years, we're 1 of 10. And that means that this podcast and everything else is working and people are listening.
We hope so too. Great advice, Ashlyn. We so appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Snap. And Ashlyn, I can't wait to see you on Sunday.
Yes, can't wait to see you guys in Jacksonville. Thank you for having me on.
Well, guys, we are out of time. So that'll do it for this week's episode of The Snap. A big thank you to all of you guys for tuning in. And thanks again to Ashlyn for joining us this week. We will see you all right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube next Friday for another fun episode.